The city was quiet that Christmas Eve, though the streets were still filled with soft echoes of last-minute shoppers and faint laughter from families enjoying the holiday lights. Snow fell gently, covering the sidewalks and roads in a thin white blanket. The air was cold, biting at anyone who walked too long without proper clothing. Most people were hurrying to get home to their families, carrying gifts, bags, or just the warmth of the holiday spirit. The CEO, a man who was well known in the city for his success and sharp mind, was also walking home. His office had kept him late with meetings, reports, and urgent decisions. And though he usually drove, tonight he decided to walk, hoping the fresh air might calm his mind as he moved through the streets. His eyes scanned the familiar buildings and sparkling lights. Most people in the city were busy enjoying Christmas Eve, but as he turned into a narrow alleyway to take a shortcut, something unusual caught his attention. At first, he thought it might be a pile of discarded boxes or trash, but then he noticed a small, fragile shape huddled on top of it. It was a child, a little girl, curled up tightly as if trying to make herself as small as possible. Her clothes were worn and thin, and the snow had already started to settle on her shoulders and hair. She was shivering visibly, and the sight of her made the CEO stop in his tracks. He felt a wave of shock and unease. The city had homeless people, of course, but a small child alone on Christmas Eve seemed unimaginable. He took a careful step closer, not wanting to frighten her. He gently cleared some snow away from the pile of trash she was on and called softly, "Hey, are you okay?" The girl stirred slightly, but did not move much. Her eyes were wide, cautious, and filled with a mixture of fear and curiosity. It was clear she was not used to adults showing concern for her. The CEO crouched down slowly, keeping his voice soft. "It's really cold out here. Can I help you?" He reached into his coat and pulled out his scarf, offering it to her. The girl hesitated, looking at it as if unsure whether to trust him. Finally, after a long pause, she took it and wrapped it around herself. Her fingers were cold and trembling, but she held the scarf tightly as if it were a lifeline. He noticed her shoes were worn through, and her socks barely covered her toes. Her hair was tangled, and her face showed signs of hunger and fatigue. He realized that she had likely been surviving in the streets for a long time. He knew he couldn't just leave her there, but he also didn't want to scare her by forcing her to move. So he sat on a nearby step, careful to give her space, and pulled out a small snack he had bought earlier at a coffee shop. It was just a granola bar, but it might be the first bit of food she had in hours. He offered it to her, and after a few moments, she took it cautiously. Her small hands shook as she unwrapped it, but she ate slowly, savoring each bite. He watched her carefully, seeing a mix of hunger, relief, and caution in her eyes. He tried to make small talk, keeping his tone light. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She looked down at the ground, clutching her small, homemade doll tightly. "I don't have a name," she whispered. His heart tightened. It was hard to imagine a child, without a family or anyone, who cared enough to even know her name. He didn't press further, realizing that she might have been through too much to speak freely. The snow continued to fall, and the wind grew colder. He felt a sense of urgency. He could not leave her there alone. The thought of the dangers on the streets at night, cars, strangers, or simply the freezing temperatures made him uneasy. He wanted to help, but he also needed to make sure she felt safe enough to go somewhere with him. He continued talking softly, telling her small stories about his own childhood Christmases, about the lights on the trees, and the smell of fresh bread from the bakery near his old home. Slowly, he noticed her posture relaxing a little. She didn't speak much, but she listened, her eyes occasionally lifting to meet his. After a few minutes, he decided he needed outside help. He pulled out his phone and called a trusted friend who ran a small shelter for children. He explained the situation quickly but carefully, trying not to alarm her. The friend assured him that someone would come to pick her up and provide a safe place to sleep for the night. He breathed a small sigh of relief, but the wait was still uncertain, and he didn't want her to be alone even for a moment. He offered her his coat as well, letting her wrap herself in the warmth of it. She finally smiled faintly, a tiny, hesitant curve of her lips. It was the first sign of comfort he had seen on her face. He realized how small gestures could mean so much to someone who had been through so much hardship. He made sure to keep his distance enough to respect her space, but close enough that she could feel protected. They sat together in the quiet alley, the world around them moving on without noticing the little girl on the trash pile. Cars passed by slowly, people walked in and out of stores, but she was invisible to most except for him. As the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, he began to understand just how resilient this child had to be. Living on the streets alone required courage, intelligence, and survival skills far beyond her age. Yet, despite everything, she still had the innocence of a child, holding on to her doll as if it were her only connection to a normal life. He wondered about her story, about how she ended up here, and about the people who were supposed to care for her. The questions weighed heavily on him, but he knew that the most important thing right now was to keep her safe. Finally, headlights appeared at the end of the alley, signaling that help had arrived. The shelter worker stepped out, bundled in warm clothes, carrying blankets and a small bag of essentials. The CEO gently encouraged the girl to stand, offering his hand. She hesitated, looking up at him with wide, uncertain eyes. "It's okay," he whispered. "They're here to help you. You'll be safe now." Slowly, she took his hand and allowed herself to be guided towards the shelter worker as they walked together. He kept talking to her softly, asking about her favorite things, telling her that the world could be kind even when it felt harsh. She listened quietly, but the small nods and occasional smiles showed that she was starting to trust him. He knew that this night would change both their lives, though he couldn't have imagined the full impact it would have by the time they reached the shelter. The little girl was beginning to feel a sense of warmth and safety she hadn't known for a long time. She was offered a hot meal, fresh clothing, and a bed for the night. The CEO stayed for a few moments, making sure she was settled before he left. He watched as she slowly relaxed into the bed, hugging her doll and closing her eyes. The sight of her finally feeling safe made him reflect on the importance of noticing those who are invisible, those who are struggling quietly, and those who need someone to care. As he walked back into the snowy streets. Heading home to his own family, he carried with him a sense of responsibility and a quiet determination. He knew that this was just the beginning, and that there was more he could do to help children like her. But for now, he felt grateful that he had found her in time, that he had been able to offer some warmth, and that he had given her a small spark of hope on a night that should be about love, kindness, and togetherness. The city continued its festive buzz, unaware of the small miracle that had happened in a quiet alley. And somewhere, in the shelter, a little girl slept peacefully for the first time in months, feeling safe, warm, and seen. And that night, the CEO learned that even the smallest acts of kindness could change a life forever. After being brought into the shelter, the little girl was still cautious, hugging her small doll tightly. The room smelled warm and safe, a stark contrast to the cold, harsh streets she had known. The lights were soft, and the staff moved quietly, speaking in gentle tones. She watched them from the corner of her eye, unsure whether to trust this new place or the people in it. The CEO, who had stayed with her until she settled, stepped back to give her space, but he could not stop his thoughts from racing. Seeing a child in such a state, especially on Christmas Eve, left a deep mark on him. He waited outside the room, while the staff offered her something to eat and a warm blanket. He noticed the way she hesitated before touching the food, as if she had not eaten properly in days. Her small hands shook slightly, and she picked at the meal, taking tiny bites at first. Slowly, she began to eat more confidently, and the CEO could see a faint glow of relief on her face. The staff explained that she was safe now, and there would be no danger for her tonight. Still, she kept her eyes darting around, showing the habits of someone who had learned to be wary of the world. The CEO knew that simply providing a bed and food was only the beginning. He wanted to understand her story, to learn how a child so young could have survived alone on the streets. But he also knew he had to be patient. She had been abandoned and hurt, and trust would not come quickly. He decided to wait, allowing her to feel secure in her new surroundings before asking too many questions. After a while, the girl grew curious about him. She watched as he spoke quietly with the shelter worker, asking questions about the safety of the place and what would happen next. She noticed that he was not like the adults she had encountered on the streets. He was calm, gentle, and did not seem to expect anything from her. There was no anger or impatience, just quiet concern. This made her feel a little more comfortable, and she finally ventured a small question. "Will I have to go back outside tomorrow?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The CEO shook his head gently. "No, you are safe here. Tonight and every night, you will have a warm bed and people who care for you." Her small eyes widened, not fully trusting yet, but the words brought her hope. As the night went on, the CEO helped the shelter staff organize a little Christmas celebration for the children there. There were a few other kids who had also found shelter, and they were sharing stories, playing with small toys, and enjoying a simple holiday meal. The little girl remained quiet at first, observing from her corner. The CEO noticed her curiosity and encouraged her gently, offering her a place near him as he talked with the other children. She hesitated, but eventually came closer, sitting quietly and listening. Slowly, she began to smile at the small jokes and stories shared by the other children. It was the first time in a long time that she had felt even a small sense of belonging. The CEO also spent time talking with the staff about her situation, trying to understand the best way to help her beyond this night. He learned that she had been abandoned by her parents, who could no longer care for her due to financial struggles. They had assumed she would be better off alone or with others, not realizing the danger she would face. Hearing this made the CEO feel a mix of anger, sadness, and determination. He understood that many children like her went unnoticed, and that helping her could be just the start of something bigger. Throughout the evening, he continued to check on her, making sure she felt safe and included. The little girl began to open up slowly, sharing tiny pieces of her story. She talked about her doll, her favorite games, and the small joys she had remembered from her life before the streets. Every story revealed her resilience and her ability to hold on to hope despite the hardships she had faced. The CEO listened with patience, offering comfort and validation, letting her know that her experiences mattered and that she was not alone anymore. As the night wore on, the atmosphere at the shelter grew quieter. The children were tucked into their beds, and the staff were preparing for the night shift. The CEO stayed a little longer, speaking softly to the little girl as she began to yawn, a sign that she was finally starting to relax. He could see that, for the first time in a long while, she felt safe enough to rest. He reassured her again that she was not alone, that people cared for her, and that tomorrow would bring a new day with more support and warmth. Before leaving, the CEO made sure that she had everything she needed: a warm blanket, a clean change of clothes, and a small gift from the shelter, wrapped in simple paper. He knelt down beside her bed, smiling gently. "Good night," he whispered. Sleep well. You are safe now." She looked up at him, eyes shining with a mix of tiredness and gratitude, and whispered back a small, heartfelt, "Thank you." That simple exchange was more powerful than any words could capture. It symbolized the beginning of trust and a sense of safety that had been missing in her life for far too long. As he left the shelter and stepped back into the quiet, snowy streets, the CEO felt a deep sense of reflection. He thought about the child on the streets, about how invisible so many people could be to the world around them, and how small actions could make a tremendous difference. The night had reminded him of the importance of noticing the unseen struggles around us and the value of human compassion. He knew that this encounter would stay with him forever, shaping the way he viewed not only the city, but his role in it. The little girl, meanwhile, lay in her warm bed, hugging her doll tightly and slowly drifting into sleep. The fear and uncertainty that had dominated her life were replaced, for the first time, with a quiet sense of security and hope. She dreamed, perhaps for the first time in months, of a life where she could feel safe, loved, and cared for. The night outside was cold, and the city moved on without noticing her transformation. But inside the shelter, a small miracle had taken place. The connection between a kind stranger and a child in need had created a spark of hope that could change her life forever. The CEO walked home slowly, the snow crunching beneath his feet. His mind replayed every moment of the evening, the way the girl had hesitated before accepting help, the small smiles she had given, the trust she had slowly begun to place in him. He realized that Christmas Eve was more than just a holiday. It was a reminder of human kindness, empathy, and the power to make a real difference in someone's life. He resolved that he would not let this be a single act, but the start of something larger. A commitment to helping those who are often forgotten. As he reached his own home, warm and lit with the glow of family and holiday cheer, he felt a mixture of emotions. Gratitude for the life he had, sadness for the struggles of those less fortunate, and determination to create positive change. He knew that the little girl's story was only beginning, and that there were more steps to take to ensure her safety, her education, and her chance at a better life. But for tonight, she was safe, warm, and no longer alone. And that was enough to bring a quiet sense of fulfillment and hope to both of their lives. The next morning, the little girl woke up to the warmth of the shelter and the gentle sunlight streaming through the window. For the first time in months, she felt safe enough to stretch and breathe without fear. She clutched her doll, but it no longer felt like a shield against danger. It was a comforting friend. The smell of breakfast filled the air-warm bread, fruit, and milk, and she cautiously approached the table, still wary of new people. The staff greeted her with soft smiles, showing her that today would be different from the long nights on the streets. The CEO arrived at the shelter early, wanting to check on her progress. He was not sure how she would react to seeing him again, but when she saw him, her eyes lit up just a little. She didn't run or hide, and that small sign of trust made him feel a mixture of relief and hope. He sat beside her during breakfast, keeping the conversation light. He asked about small things, the color of her doll's dress, her favorite food, the games she liked to play. Slowly, she began to open up, speaking in quiet but more confident words. Each answer revealed pieces of her story, the hardships she had faced, and the ways she had survived. As she talked, he noticed the strength in her words, the courage she had developed just to stay alive. The CEO was deeply moved. It was clear that this small child had endured far more than anyone should at her age. He listened without interruption, letting her share at her own pace. He realized that part of helping her was not just giving her a warm bed and food, but giving her space to be heard and acknowledged. Her story mattered, and it deserved to be listened to. After breakfast, the shelter staff suggested that the CEO spend some time with her outside, letting her see a bit of normal life again. They walked together to a small nearby park where the snow had settled in soft mounds. The little girl hesitated at first, unsure how to interact with the world after months of isolation. But the CEO encouraged her gently, pointing out simple joys, the way snowflakes landed on her coat, the tracks animals had left in the snow, and the bright decorations on the nearby houses. Gradually, she began to explore, walking carefully on the snow and even laughing quietly as her boots crunched. The sound was small, but it was the first genuine laughter he had heard from her. They stopped by a small fountain, where the water had frozen into delicate patterns. The CEO showed her how to touch the ice safely, and they marveled at the shapes together. He explained that even in cold and difficult times, there could be beauty in unexpected places. The little girl nodded slowly, as if absorbing the lesson without needing words. Her eyes, which had been cautious and wary, began to reflect a sense of curiosity and wonder again. He realized that this was an important step. She was beginning to trust the world once more. After some time outside, they returned to the shelter, where the staff had planned a meeting to discuss the next steps for her care. The CEO listened carefully as they explained the legal and social support available for children like her. They discussed options for finding her extended family, though they noted that in many cases, children had to be placed in safe foster care if no relatives could provide a secure environment. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, knowing that decisions made in the coming days could significantly impact her life. He promised the staff that he would do whatever was necessary to ensure she had a stable and loving environment. During the day, the little girl continued to open up. She showed the CEO the small things she had kept from her life on the streets: a tattered notebook, a few coins, and the small doll she clung to so tightly. He listened as she explained how she had survived, scavenging for food, finding shelter, and avoiding dangers. Her story was heart-wrenching, but it also revealed her resilience. He realized that this child had learned to face the world in ways that most adults would struggle to understand. He admired her courage and determination, and he knew that helping her would require patience and care. The CEO also began to see small signs of change in her. She laughed more freely, shared small thoughts without fear, and even asked questions about the world around her. He answered CH question patiently, explaining things simply and honestly. He noticed that she was beginning to trust him, and he felt a sense of fulfillment knowing that his presence was helping her heal. It was a slow process, but every small step mattered. As evening approached, the shelter prepared a small Christmas celebration for the children. The little girl watched as other kids decorated a tree, hung ornaments, and exchanged small gifts. She hesitated, unsure if she belonged, but the CEO encouraged her to join in. Slowly, she approached, helping hang decorations and placing a small handmade ornament on the tree. The staff smiled, recognizing the small but significant progress she was making. For the first time, she experienced a sense of inclusion and normalcy, a feeling that had been absent from her life for so long. During the celebration, the CEO spoke privately with the shelter staff about her long-term needs. He wanted to ensure that she had access to education, counseling, and ongoing support. He realized that giving her a safe night was only the first step. Rebuilding her life required consistent care and attention. The staff agreed, noting that she had already shown remarkable resilience and adaptability. They discussed plans for her future, emphasizing the importance of stability, routine, and a nurturing environment. After the celebration, the little girl returned to her bed, holding her doll and feeling a small sense of security. The CEO stayed a moment longer, watching her settle in. He thought about the challenges she had faced and the journey that lay ahead. He knew that it would not be easy, but he also understood that with patience, care, and support, she could begin to reclaim her childhood and her sense of trust in the world. He whispered goodnight, promising that she would not face the world alone again. That night, as the little girl slept, the CEO reflected on the events of the day. He realized that small acts of kindness, offering warmth, food, and a listening ear, could have a profound impact on a life. He thought about how many children were still out there, invisible and struggling, and he resolved to do more. His experience with this little girl had awakened a new purpose in him, to help those who had no one to notice them, to provide care and protection where it was desperately needed. The next morning, he planned to begin steps that could change her life permanently. He would work with the shelter to ensure she received education, emotional support, and a stable home environment. He also wanted to explore ways to raise awareness and resources for other children in similar situations. But for now, he allowed himself to feel hope and satisfaction. The little girl was safe. She was beginning to trust again, and she had a chance at a better life. That knowledge filled him with a quiet determination and a sense of purpose. In the quiet of the shelter, as snow continued to fall outside, the CEO understood that this was more than a single act of kindness. It was the start of a journey for both the little girl and himself. She had survived unimaginable hardships, and he had been given the opportunity to help guide her towards safety and hope. He knew that the days ahead would be challenging, but he also knew that the bond of trust and care they were building could withstand difficulties and make a lasting difference. The little girl's story, which had begun in fear and uncertainty, was slowly turning into a story of hope, trust, and the possibility of a brighter future. And the CEO, who had simply stopped to help on a snowy Christmas Eve, had become an unexpected guardian and advocate, determined to ensure that her life would be filled with warmth, love, and security from this day forward. As the days passed, the little girl slowly began to adjust to life in the shelter. The warmth, safety, and routine were foreign to her, yet each small moment brought comfort. She started to sleep more soundly, eat more confidently, and even speak a little louder, her words carrying less caution and more trust. The CEO continued to visit, not every day, but often enough to remind her that she was not alone, that someone genuinely cared about her well-being. One afternoon, as the little girl played with blocks in the shelter's common room, she hesitated before stacking another piece. The CEO noticed and asked softly why she paused. She looked at him with wide eyes and said that she was afraid it might fall and break. He smiled gently, explaining that it was okay if it fell, that mistakes could be fixed, and that trying again was part of learning. The girl listened carefully, and with his encouragement, she placed the block confidently. It was a small moment, but it represented something much bigger, a growing sense of security and confidence in herself. The CEO also spent time talking with the shelter staff about her past, piecing together the fragments of her story. He learned that her parents, overwhelmed by poverty and personal struggles, had left her alone, assuming someone else would take care of her. They had not imagined the danger and hardship she would face on the streets. Hearing this left him with a mixture of anger, sadness, and determination. He knew that while the past could not be changed, her future could be shaped with the right care, love, and support. One morning, the CEO arranged a meeting with the social worker assigned to her case. They discussed the options for her long-term safety, including the possibility of finding extended family or placing her in a foster home that could provide stability and care. The CEO emphasized the importance of keeping her environment as familiar and comforting as possible during this transition. He wanted her to feel secure and supported, not just for days or weeks, but for the years ahead. The little girl, meanwhile, was beginning to trust him more each day. She would ask questions about the city, about the holidays, and about life outside the shelter. He answered each question patiently, explaining things simply and truthfully. She began to laugh at small jokes, share her thoughts, and even tell stories about the doll she loved so dearly. These moments were precious, small glimpses of the childhood that had been denied to her, and they brought a quiet warmth to the CEO's heart. One chilly afternoon, the CEO took her on a walk to a nearby library. He wanted her to experience a world beyond the shelter walls, to see books and stories that could ignite her imagination. The little girl was initially hesitant, but as soon as she stepped inside and saw the rows of books, her eyes widened with wonder. She ran her fingers along the spines, carefully selecting a few picture books. They sat together, and he read aloud, helping her follow the words. For the first time in months, she was engaged in a peaceful, joyful activity, safe from hunger, cold, and fear. During the visit, the CEO noticed how much she wanted to learn, how curious she was about the world. He realized that education would be a crucial part of her recovery, a way to empower her and give her confidence in her abilities. He discussed with the shelter staff about enrolling her in school as soon as possible, ensuring she would have support, both academically and emotionally. The thought of giving her not just safety, but a future, filled him with hope and determination. Back at the shelter, the little girl's routine began to stabilize. She learned small skills helping to set the table, tidying her space, and interacting with other children in the shelter. Each step, no matter how minor, was a victory. The CEO noticed that she was beginning to smile more naturally, her body language less tense, and her trust in adults growing. It was a slow process, but the transformation was real. She was beginning to reclaim her childhood, piece by piece. One evening, the CEO stayed a little longer, helping her make a small craft for the upcoming holiday. As they worked together, she shared more about her past, her dreams, and the little joys she remembered before life on the streets became harsh. He listened attentively, never judging, always encouraging. Her stories were a mix of sadness and resilience, fear and hope. Each tale revealed a part of her spirit, a strength he admired deeply. As the days continued, the CEO made a decision. He wanted to create a program within his company to support children like her, those who were invisible, struggling, and in need of help. He shared his idea with the shelter staff, and together they began to plan how to provide resources, mentorship, and opportunities for children facing similar circumstances. The little girl's story had inspired him, showing him firsthand how one person noticing and acting could change a life forever. During one visit, the CEO and the little girl walked in a small garden behind the shelter. Snow had melted slightly, revealing patches of green and early flowers starting to bloom. He used the opportunity to teach her about patience and growth, explaining how even the harshest winters eventually gave way to new life. She listened quietly, absorbing the lesson. Slowly, she began to smile, understanding that just like the garden, she too could grow and flourish with care and time. The CEO also introduced her to other children who had been through difficult situations. Watching her interact cautiously at first, and then gradually opening up, was a heartwarming experience. She learned how to share, play, and trust, small steps that were monumental for someone who had known only fear and solitude. He realized that connection and social interaction were just as important as food, warmth, and shelter. They were helping her rebuild her sense of belonging and humanity. One afternoon, the social worker received news that the little girl had a distant relative who might be able to provide long-term care. The CEO accompanied her to meet this relative, ensuring the transition would be gentle and reassuring. The little girl approached cautiously, her hand in the CEO's, seeking comfort and courage. The meeting went well. The relative showed willingness to care for her and provide a stable home. The CEO felt relief, knowing that her future was beginning to take shape with safety, support, and love. After the meeting, the CEO spent some quiet moments with her, walking through the shelter gardens as the sun began to set. She clung to her doll, but her eyes were brighter than before. She asked questions about the city, her new home, and the holidays ahead. He answered each one with patience, reinforcing that she was never alone and that she had people who cared deeply about her. The trust between them had grown remarkably. A bond formed through compassion, patience, and shared experiences. That night, as she lay in bed, the little girl felt a sense of calm and hope she had never known. The streets, cold and unforgiving, were far behind her. The warmth of the shelter, the kindness of the CEO, and the support of the staff created a safe bubble where she could begin to heal. She hugged her doll tightly, not as a shield against fear, but as a comforting friend, and drifted into a peaceful sleep. The CEO walked home through the quiet city streets, snow beginning to fall lightly again. He reflected on the transformation he had witnessed, from a frightened child shivering on trash to a girl beginning to trust and hope for the future. He thought about the countless children who might still be unseen, and the ways in which small acts of care could change lives. His heart was full, but he also knew this was only the beginning. There were more steps to take, more support to provide, and more awareness to raise. But the journey of one child had already taught him more than he could have imagined about resilience, hope, and the power of human kindness. As he entered his own warm home, surrounded by his family and the glow of the holiday season, he carried with him a deep sense of purpose. The little girl's journey had reminded him of the importance of noticing those who are often invisible, and of taking action to help. Her life was beginning to change, and he was determined to ensure that her future would be filled with safety, love, and opportunity. The impact of a single Christmas Eve encounter had rippled far beyond that night, shaping both their lives in ways that would be felt for years to come. The little girl's transition to a safe and stable home was gradual, filled with small victories and quiet moments of trust. The CEO continued to check in, providing support and reassurance. Each visit brought new signs of growth. She was more confident, she spoke more freely, and she began to laugh without hesitation. Her small gestures, once cautious and hesitant, now showed curiosity and engagement with the world around her. The doll she had always clutched was still near, but it had transformed from a shield of fear into a companion of comfort. As the CEO observed her adapting to her new life, he felt a deep sense of responsibility and gratitude. Responsibility because he had taken the first steps to help her, and gratitude because he had witnessed the strength and resilience of a child who had faced unimaginable challenges. Her ability to trust again, to open her heart to kindness, was nothing short of inspiring. He knew that supporting her was not a temporary duty, but a long-term commitment to help her build a life she deserved. The shelter staff remained involved, guiding her through the initial days of adjustment. They worked on practical matters, enrolling her in school, establishing routines, and ensuring she had access to counseling to process her experiences. The CEO contributed whenever possible, arranging resources, providing support for educational needs, and even bringing small gifts to encourage her interests. The little girl began to show an eagerness to learn, asking questions about the world, reading books, and sharing stories about her dreams for the future. One afternoon, the CEO took her to a community center where other children engaged in art and music activities. The little girl was initially shy, standing at the edge and observing. The CEO knelt beside her and encouraged her to join in, reminding her that it was okay to try new things and make mistakes. Slowly, she picked up a paintbrush and began to create simple shapes on the paper. Her concentration and the joy in her eyes were unmistakable. He watched silently, proud of her courage and determination to explore something new. Over the following weeks, she began forming friendships with other children at the shelter and in her new school. She learned to play games, share, and express her feelings in healthy ways. The CEO noticed the subtle changes in her posture and expression. Her shoulders relaxed, her gaze was steadier, and she no longer flinched at sudden noises or movements. Trust and safety were becoming second nature, a stark contrast to the fear that had defined her life on the streets. The CEO also made efforts to help her understand and process her past. He gently explained that while her parents had failed to protect her, it was not her fault. He emphasized that she was strong, brave, and deserving of love and care. She listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes looking thoughtful, and slowly began to internalize the idea that she could have a future filled with hope. This guidance, combined with the shelter's counseling, helped her start to heal emotionally and mentally. During this time, the CEO also began to formalize his support for children like her. He created a small foundation within his company, aimed at providing resources, mentorship, and safe spaces for children who had been abandoned or neglected. He shared his vision with the shelter and other organizations, hoping to expand the impact and help as many children as possible. The little girl became, in a way, the face of hope for this initiative, showing that even one act of kindness could ripple outward and create lasting change. Months passed, and the little girl began to thrive. She excelled in school, participated actively in community activities, and developed strong, trusting relationships with the adults who cared for her. Her laughter became more frequent, her curiosity more evident, and her sense of self-worth grew steadily. The CEO continued to visit regularly, offering encouragement, celebrating her successes, and reminding her of the strength and courage she had shown from the very beginning. One winter afternoon, nearly a year after that first encounter on Christmas Eve, the CEO visited her new home. She ran to him, her smile wide and genuine, her eyes sparkling with happiness. She hugged him tightly, and he held her with a sense of pride and love. It was a full-circle moment, a testament to resilience, compassion, and the power of human kindness. The little girl, who had once been invisible and alone, was now seen supported and thriving. The CEO watched as she showed him her schoolwork, her art projects, and the little space she had arranged in her room for her beloved doll. He realized that the combination of safety, care, and opportunity had transformed her life. The experience had changed him too, reminding him that noticing someone in need and taking action could have far-reaching effects. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, committed to helping more children find their way to safety, love, and opportunity. Through this journey, the little girl learned that the world could be kind, that people could be trustworthy, and that life could hold joy and hope even after hardship. She discovered that she was capable, valued, and deserving of love. Her resilience, combined with the compassion of those who stepped in to help, created a life that was no longer defined by fear, but by possibility. The CEO's role in her life, initially a chance encounter, had become a meaningful connection. He continued to support her, not as a savior, but as a mentor and friend, guiding her through challenges and celebrating achievements. The little girl, now confident and hopeful, grew into a young person who understood the value of kindness, the strength of resilience, and the importance of caring for others. As the holiday season approached once again, the little girl reflected on the previous Christmas Eve, the night when a stranger noticed her, cared for her, and gave her a chance at a new life. She understood the impact of that single act of compassion and wanted to carry that spirit forward. With the CEO's encouragement, she began to participate in activities that helped other children in need, sharing her story and spreading hope. Her journey had come full circle, from a frightened child on the streets to a beacon of hope and resilience. the city continued to bustle with life. But somewhere in it, a little girl who had once been invisible now thrived, surrounded by care, trust, and love. And the CEO, who had stopped to help on a snowy Christmas Eve, continued to be inspired by her growth, realizing that every act of kindness, no matter how small, had the potential to change lives. Their story was a testament to human compassion, courage, and the profound difference one person can make in another's life. It showed that even in the darkest moments, hope and kindness could light the way to a brighter future.